In this video, we're going to take a look at using the trig ratios, sine, cos and tan, to find an angle. So up to this point, you likely have been using the angles to figure out one of the missing sides. But what if we have some sides and we're missing an angle? The starting procedure is always going to be the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out my word SOHCAHTOA, which helps me to remember the formula. It's also going to help me to pick a formula now in a moment. If I'm at this angle here and I look out across, I see 12. That means that this 12 is going to get the label of the opposite side because it is opposite to the angle of interest. I then go and I put a tick under the letter O in each case because I'm working with an opposite. This 13 is across from the right angle. This is a very important side. Across from the right angle always is the hypotenuse. So I can now go and put a tick under the letter H. Now that we've labelled our sides and we've put our ticks, we now need to take a look and examine which formula do we have the most information for. And sine has the most ticks, so I'm going to use that one. It has 2 ticks. So once you've picked your formula, you do that by labelling the sides, ticking off what you have. Now you start the FIFA method. So I'm going to start by writing out the formula. So it goes sine of an angle is equal to O over H. So it'll be opposite over hypotenuse. The next thing I need to do then is I need to write out my information. Now in this case, I don't know what the angle is. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm just going to say A. That's what I'm looking for. The opposite side, I do know. It's 12. And I do know the hypotenuse side. That's going to be 13. Now, I've written out my formula. I've written out my information. The next step is also exactly the same as we usually do. We're going to fill it in. So formula, information, fill it in. So I'm going to go and I'm going to fill in sine. I don't know what that is. Let's keep it as the letter A for a minute. And then I'm going to have opposite, which is 12. So 12 all over the hypotenuse, which is 13. Now, normally what would happen next is we would put this into our calculator, but we don't know what the angle is. I have to find the angle. So here's what you have to ask yourself. What is happening to A? What's happening to it? We're getting sine of the angle. Now, if I want to get rid of sine of the angle, I have to get rid of sine. And to do that, we need to use something called sine inverse to get rid of it. So we're going to go sine, and it's written like that, sine to the -1. So sine with a -1 up there. If I do it to this side, I just am left with A, right? Because the whole reason we introduced this sine inverse was to get rid of that sine. So we're just left with A. And on this side then what we will have is we will be taking sine inverse of 12 over 13. Now, sine inverse is just another button in our calculator. So the same way when you saw sine, cos and tan for the first time, you might have gone, oh, I have no idea how to handle this. Now you're probably pretty confident at it because you've used it a few times. If I want to get an angle though, I need to do the inverse of sine. So you're going to do that by pressing shift and sine in your calculator. So make sure you know how to do that. So shift, or sometimes on your calculator, it might be second function. If you press those two together, you'll get sine inverse. Okay, really important that you know how to get that out and when to use it. In this case then, if I go to my calculator and I put that in, I'm going to press shift, second function, and then I press the fraction button and I type it in exactly as I see it on the page. If I do that, I get 67.38 degrees, and that then tells me what the angle was. So to recap again, the first stage is exactly the same. You write out your word SOHCAHTOA, you label your sides, they get labelled the same as always. You put your ticks under which ones you have, and then you pick your formula. So all of that is the same as everything you've been doing so far. The next step then, once you've picked your formula, you're going to start the FIFA method. Now, up as far as this stage here, it's exactly the same as what we've been doing. There's no change. So you write out your formula, you fill it in, and the only difference in this entire question from what you've been doing so far is the final step when you're working out your answer. If I'm getting sine of an angle and I want to get that angle A on its own, to get rid of it, I'm going to do sine inverse of both sides. That's just another button on your calculator. So to undo it, you do sine inverse. Whatever you do to one side of an equation, you must do to the other. On the left side, it gets rid of it. On the right side, you can pop that into your calculator. Remember, this, we press shift and sine in our calculator, and you'll get then to type in the fraction. When you press equals, then it gives you your angle. Let's take a look at another example. So, here we are again. We're being asked to find the angle A. I'm going to start out by writing SOHCAHTOA. So that's the same as everything we have done so far. Now what needs to happen? I'm going to label my sides. So this side down here, he is next to or beside the angle. We did a lot of work on that before. We learned that beside or next to is that word adjacent. So I'm going to put a tick under A for adjacent. The next thing that I need to look at is, what is this side? This side is across from the right angle. If it's across from the right angle, remember it gets the label of hypotenuse. Okay, it's a special side in the right angle triangle. So I put a tick under where I have the letter H. Now I look at which formula do I have the most information for, and that is in this case CA, which of course stands for cos of the angle is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. So again, none of this is new. You would have done this before. The next step then is to list out our information. So our angle is what we're looking for. The adjacent side we are able to write out. We do know that the adjacent side is 8, and we also know that the hypotenuse side is 10.5. I have my formula, I have my information. The third step is going to be fill it in. So I'm going to have cos of A is equal to adjacent, which is 8, all over hypotenuse, which is 10.5. Again, nothing there is new. The only new step now is when I go to work out my answer. I have cos of A. And if I want to get rid of the cos, I need to undo it. How do I undo cos? Give a guess. It's going to be cos inverse. And then remember, whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. So cos inverse gets rid of cos, and then we're going to have A is equal to cos inverse of 8 all over 10.5. Then, how do I get cos inverse in my calculator? The same way that you got sine, but with the cos button. You're going to press shift and cos. Then you're going to type in your fraction. So press the fraction button, and then you're going to put in 8 all over 10.5. So I'm then going to have that A is equal to 40.5 0.367, which if I round that to 2 decimal places is 40.37. So again, the only step really that is new there is when you're working out the answer from here down. Every other part of that is exactly the same as what we did before. I'm going to do one more example. In this case, they're just making it a bit of a real world problem. No issues, we can do that. So it says a ramp is 2.1 meters long. It is 20 centimeters high. Calculate the angle Y. All right, so again, we're going to start by writing out the word SOHCAHTOA. And I don't want anyone skipping that step. None of the steps here are skippable. If you want to make sure that under pressure in the exam, you're going to get this right. Make sure you use all of the steps. First thing, SOHCAHTOA. Now let's label them. So this angle is what we're working with. This side is across from that angle. So it gets labelled as opposite. This side is the other side we're working with. So he is next to the angle. So he's going to be labelled adjacent because he's beside the angle. In this case, we don't have the hypotenuse. It's not written down. So I'm not going to tick that one. So I do have opposite and I do have adjacent. Then we look which one has the most ticks. That tells us what formula to pick. So we've got TOA, which is going to be tan of our angle is equal to opposite over adjacent. There's our formula. Now let's look at our information. In this case, we are still looking for an angle, but instead of calling it the letter A, they call it Y. So let's match their language. Let's call our angle Y. Then we're going to have, we need the opposite. So the opposite is going to be equal to 20. And the adjacent is going to be equal to 2.1. So I'm just getting all that from the picture. Again, none of this is new. If you've been practicing trigonometry so far, none of this is new. Now we're going to fill it in. So we're going to do tan of, instead of A, I'm simply going to write the letter Y, is equal to opposite, which we just said was 20, all over adjacent, which is 2.1. Now, I want to figure out what the letter Y is. In other words, I want to get Y on its own. If I look at what's stopping the Y from being on its own, it's the tan. So how do I undo or get rid of tan? I'm going to do tan inverse, just like all the others. The opposite or inverse operation of tan is tan inverse. So tan and tan inverse undo each other. And then we have Y is equal to tan inverse of this side. So it's going to be 20 all over 2.1. And then we're going to have that Y is equal to, so I get my calculator, I press shift and tan to get tan inverse. I press my fraction button then, and I'm going to put 20 all over 2.1. And when I do that, then I get 84.0 to the nearest 2 decimal places. If I do the 2 decimal places, I get 0.1. So that's it. That's the next stage of your trigonometry journey. So far, you know and should be confident at using angles to find sides. Now, 90% of these steps are the same. The only new thing is when you're trying to work out your answer. You just have to say, I want to get the angle on its own. What's happening to it right now? We're getting tan of the angle. How do you undo or get rid of tan? You do tan inverse. Whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. So you get tan inverse of this side. And then you get your angle. So that's the next and kind of final stage of the trigonometry and the SOHCAHTOA journey for junior cycle.